when we're dialoguing about, when we choose to dialogue about science and faith, we are automatically standing with the intelligent design theorists and the evolutionary creationists in their repudiation of the warfare model. We're making a decision to say, actually, there is no warfare between science and faith. What there is instead is the possibility of a dialogue. And the possibility of a dialogue, even if the dialogue isn't happening, is not the same as warfare. Choosing to dialogue is choosing to see your conversation partner who has an opposing viewpoint as having something valuable to contribute to the conversation. And this runs against cultural grains. When I've talked to young Earth creationists, for example, as soon as I mention the fact that I believe that life evolved, a lot of them want to jump down my throat. But the same thing happens when I talk to an intelligent design theorist and suggest that a young Earth creationist might have something positive to contribute to their biblical hermeneutic. If you are trying to ask a question of your partner that you yourself are unwilling to ask of yourself, you clearly have a bias in that area. And I'm completely happy saying that because I know I myself have many biases that I refuse to think about. You have to be willing to recognize that you have something to learn from the opposing viewpoints. I think that the young Earth creationist and the old Earth creationist models have the ability to contribute very, very fruitfully to the science and religion dialogue. I really believe, and I believe this strongly, that if people would be willing to actually engage young Earth creationists on their own terms, especially with regards to their criticisms of historical, critical, biblical interpretation, they will find that there is the possibility of a great and helpful conversation between these vastly differing viewpoints. The challenges that the young Earth creationist and the old Earth creationist put to the faith in historical critical interpretation, that is the hallmark of traditional seminary teaching, ought to be generative, and their questions are dismissed, I think, at the peril of advancement in historical critical methodology. And you may ask me, well, what's an example of that? Well, a lot of young Earth creationists ask, why do you accept this historical critical model to begin with? If you go on the Facebook page for most science and faith groups, this question gets asked by young Earth creationists all the time. Why do you accept historical critical methodology, and why do you reject my interpretation of Scripture? Instead of engaging that question, instead of talking about why historical critical methodology is the best one, what will often happen is somebody who is not part of the young and old Earth creationist camp is going to get upset, and they're going to start denigrating the young Earth creationists for holding to their propositional notion of truth in Scripture. This hides the fact, in my opinion and in my experience, that there are questions about the validity of historical critical interpretation in a basic philosophical way that people don't want to ask because they're afraid of damaging the foundations of their faith in their own particular pet methodology. We see this also in Richard Dawkins, who doesn't like anybody who questions phyletic gradualism, which is why he is so dismissive of people like Stephen Jay Gould, for example, who focused on the idea of punctuated equilibrium, which is, again, that is a scientific theory that runs counter to this strict Darwinian model of how life evolved.